Oh, hi. Welcome. Welcome to Jake's Existential Kitchen. Not in a kitchen. At least not in a conventional sense. My mind is like a kitchen. Your mind is like a kitchen. I'm cooking up ideas, Make something dank from scratch. I can bring over a little salt, put it with your pepper. Anyways. So, today's episode is super cool. Super. No, really though, it's really cool. It's with my friend Tarek Maassarani. We met in California, and he is really an incredible person. Just getting to hang out with him and work with him and just play music together. It's really, really awesome. And it's okay. So to be totally honest, I'm re-recording this intro right now. I already recorded an intro for this podcast, and so I recorded this. The intro that I recorded wound up being mostly me, me just being just rambling on about how stoked I am to be in the forest, pretty much, and around all this life and green and growth, and because I just drove back around to the East Coast from California, where this podcast was recorded about 2 weeks prior, back towards Maryland, D.C. area, a little outside of, and which Tarek has also spent quite a bit of time in, and personally, yeah, to just as his friend, I didn't, and I don't really know as to what capacity that he was out here when we talked about doing this podcast and sitting down and hanging out and talking, and in all complete honesty, I okay, I recorded an intro yesterday talking about, well, firstly apologizing for my, it's not laziness. I've been driving. I've been doing a lot, but it's been over a month since I uploaded a podcast, and so I'm just like, all right, here we are, and sorry for the delay. I'm gonna try to be more on it and consistent, but really just because I do want to speak on it, because it is so beautiful out here. It's so beautiful everywhere, but I grew up here in Maryland, and um, I've been away, traveling and being on the east or the west coast, sorry, for the most part of like the last 4 years, and coming back here this time, driving back from Southern California through the deserts and the Midwest and the plains and things, and the perspective that I've been able to get or see from, or however, it really is amazing to me. And it's making me see that there seems to have been some sort of blockage, mental blockage, or perceptual blockage that I seem to be holding on to, or seem to have been holding, or have held on to, in some sort of way that almost like literally kept me from being able to recognize and appreciate the life and the beauty and the earth and just all that was going on in this state and like this whole region, and personally, a part of that is because I grew up here, and for the first 22 years of my life, I didn't really leave very much. Just I didn't leave the little area of essentially the mountains, for like the valley, that was surrounded by mountains. I basically only left there a handful of times to go to maybe a music festival or the beach once a year or something like that. Literally, maybe once, maybe 3 times a year tops. Leave the actual area in some way, and so within that, I lived a life within the cityscape, and for the most part, you go to school and you're in the buildings, and you get out of school and you're tired, and then you get out of school, you graduate school, and then for someone like me, I graduate high school and I start work. I'm just working all the time. Just like 6-7 days a week, pretty much, and so there wasn't really a lot of space or energy or will to recognize, to explore, to appreciate, and to learn about this beautiful place that I am incredibly fortunate to be able to spend time in, and with, and yeah, hindsight's 2020 or whatever, but here we are now, and wherever here is for you and us at this moment, as my voice is with you right now, we can always make that shift, and it's like, oh wait, like where am I holding myself back? I wish it was that easy. I don't know how to totally instigate the appreciation, I suppose. I mean, just listen to the birds, Everything around me is green, Even in the deserts, there's life everywhere. Maybe not all deserts, but like, speaking for myself, it's like my head, my mind, my own mind can just be a prison in a sense. I can tell myself, without even knowing it, I can have myself convinced that I know what the world is like, and I know the extent of the world and what is possible to be happening within it, and what outcomes will, that is something that I have done, and I still do, I'm sure, in ways that I am not hopefully yet aware of, and there's I don't know. There's just something really beautiful about seeing that we don't have to keep ourselves trapped. I think a part of that trap can be convincing ourselves that something outside of us is keeping us trapped, and that we're powerless, and that there's nothing that we can do to feel better and to help those around us feel better and safer. And that's not true. And Tarek, today's guest, is very well educated on that matter. When I asked him if there were any links or organizations or anything that he would want me to share within this episode. He sent me a link for a Google document, a shared Google document on restorative justice. Restorative DC is the organization, and that there will be a link for that in this bio. But please just do yourself a favor and Google Tarek yourself and look at the things that he has spent his life giving attention to and energy and love to. It's very inspiring, and the reason why I'm re-recording this intro is because I feel it's really important to point out some specifics about what I just said, and in the intro, and again, in all honesty, in the intro that I recorded yesterday for this episode, I had never Googled my friend Tarek. But today I Googled him, and after already uploading this episode, I Googled Tarek's name and found so much information, and so just okay. Yeah, just again, do yourself a favor and Google Tarek. He is an author, so many things, and I'm not gonna say any of them specifically, just because when I asked him what he wanted to share, all he said was this link of resources for information, literature, groups and guides to participation and growth within restorative justice fields and mindsets. And so that's what I'm going to do. That link will be in this bio for this episode, and check Tarek out, and yeah, so many avenues for learning and for learning how to participate and try to help move in a direction of union and support and safety and accountability. And I think a part of that is us all giving the energy and taking an extra step. If the first step means to make a Google search or click on a link and spend 20 minutes reading about something that you haven't heard of before. I mean, let's build that snowball. Let's build the snowball. It's only got to be a little one, but we just got to push it off, push it off the hill, and learn. And we can learn, and we can learn how to grow our sense of community between each other and between us and our environment, our land. It's not ours, but the land that we are a part of also. How we can be good community members, and we can do it. I think we can do it. And speaking for myself, I am the only one that's kept myself away from believing that. And if I don't believe that things can be better and safer and healthier. If I don't believe that, then might as well. I mean, then I'm certainly out of the picture in helping in any way to create that or to facilitate growth in that direction. And sounds like some pretty cool stuff to me. And well, yeah, I'll stop rambling and we can get right into the episode so you can actually hear Tarek himself speak and just be his old sweet self. I'm very grateful for Tarek and his time and just being able to know him and learn from him. I'm grateful for you for directing your attention our way and sharing this moment with us. So let's all put our hearts together and welcome to Jake's Existential Kitchen in the woods, Tarek Maassarani.
When they tell me I'm high up in the sky, waiting for me when I die. Between the day you're born and when you die, they never seem to hear you when you're crying. As sure as the sun will shine, I'm gonna get my share of what's mine. The harder they'll come, the harder they'll fall. The oppressors are trying to keep me down. They're trying to drive me underground. Oh, they think they've got the final war. I say, give them, Lord, they don't have what they've done. As sure as the sun will shine, I'm gonna get my share of what's mine. The harder they'll come, the harder they'll fall. On and on.
Welcome, Tarek.
Hello.
Cool. I'm glad we're finally getting to do this. So how we've managed to meet is is really really wild and beautiful when I think about just on my end all the synchronicities and stuff that kind of came into place for us to find ourselves in the same place.
Yeah. You remember the first encounter?
What remind me?
I think you walked into Dylan's driveway
Yeah.
sometime last summer while we were staying, and he was on vacation with family.
Yes, that's
And,
right.
Yeah. You
Y'all-
were fetching something.
Y'all had surfboards. I was getting some stuff. I was gonna go feed some bees, and y'all had surfboards. I was like, oh, hey,
Yeah.
y'all. I was right away. You know, friends of the Dylans is, and
Yeah.
so on the synchronicity note, between you and I, you told me one day that you were doing some work with Montgomery County schools and police being involved in the public schools, right?
Mm-hmm.
Could you tell me a little bit about that? As you know, I've family who lives there, and which to me is so wild to have met you here in Santa Barbara, and that being something that you put energy towards. And
Well, I think I can't think of a better way of introducing the whole topic than by noting that today, April 20th, 2021, was the verdict in the Derek Chauvin case. the police officer that knelt on George Floyd's head and neck for over 8 minutes, leading to his death. They found him guilty, the police officer, for all 3 counts of murder, and that, which happened about almost a year ago, was obviously wasn't the first time, but was such a visible and moving trigger for large-scale disgust at the way police, or at the impacts that police have, especially on black communities. And it has catalyzed movements around the country to look, like, review, revision, redesign police and their role. So actually, just earlier in the month, on the 1st of the month, DC, just nearby to Maryland, a commission on police reform released a very large and comprehensive report looking at, like, all the ways that the role of police be shrunk to encompass only a minimal sort of number of responsibilities, and that much of what otherwise can be done better by other systems, individuals, teams, and so forth, and all the resources be rerouted that way. And so schools are also one of those kind of channels of rethinking the role of police. And it's funny that I ended up involved with it now in Montgomery County, Maryland, more than DC, since I'd lived in DC for 17 years up until the pandemic started, and was very active on a number of related issues. And by related, I mean dealing with, like, the school-to-prison pipeline, returning citizens, mass incarceration. But it just so happened one of my DC contacts put me in touch with one of the council members who was interested in pushing, for the removal of police from schools. That's Councilmember Hans Reamer. And that began, I think that started in December. And so it began like what must be now 4 or 5 month process of consulting together and developing kind of a memo and another longer document that describes how both to limit, to remove police presence from schools is sort of, there's different strategies, as you can imagine. In this case, what we came at was that all and any kind of regular police presence in schools would be eliminated, and that there would be only a very small slice of situations in which police could come onto school grounds, and those had to be ones in which there was an imminent threat of physical injury. If there wasn't, even if there had been physical injury, but there's no longer an imminent threat, that wouldn't justify a police call.
Yeah.
So one of the filters is just sort of what you can call the police on, but then the other safeguard, if you will, was that the police could only be called to a campus by certain designated folks on campus, and then they would need to provide an explanation for why it met the criteria.
Interesting. So there's like a list of people at a given school that are authorized, or that the police would be able to actually listen to.
Yeah.
So if somebody called and was not on that said list, then they would not be able to respond legally.
That's what we're proposing. Yeah.
Okay.
That there would be a kind of a memorandum of understanding with the police department that would allow, that would allow only certain folks. And of course, you'd need to be careful about this to make sure that you'd have those people present. And so it's not a short list necessarily, but it is a list, and it's a list of people who would understand also the limited basis on which they have authorization to call police. So there's sort of that procedural safeguard as well, is what we're proposing. And of course, that addresses removing police, but what does it do to re-envision safety? And so this was mostly where I came in. I'd been doing restorative justice for about a decade, and in particular in DC in schools for the better part of the last 5, 6, 7 years.
So can I ask you to at least just in short, kind of like tell me what restorative justice like means to you? Like what would that encompass?
Yeah. So I'm going to give a little bit of I'm going to kind of nod to history in answering that question. So the term restorative justice really gained widespread use. Let's say that first gained use at all really in like the 70s, and then became more widely spread into the 90s. And at the time, what it meant then was much more narrow than what it means now. Back then, it basically was like these alternatives to the criminal system. It meant...
Alternatives.
Right. So it meant, for example, if a young person was arrested, instead of them getting hauled off to a juvenile court, they would get diverted to a program where they would need to talk it out with the person. Let's say the shop owner of the store they shoplifted, right? Or the parent and student that they might have bullied or assaulted, or right. So it's sort of this facilitated conversation in lieu of a court process. And if that facilitated conversation ended in some kind of agreement and folks were satisfied with it, ideally, and many programs did this, it would be completely diverted and you'd have no record. Another fairly common, maybe not so common, but one of the early examples was after someone had been sentenced. And this happened for like serious harms, like murders and rapes. After someone had sentenced, if the victim or the family of the victim didn't find closure in the sentence and wanted to talk with the person that did it, there were some programs, including in Texas, that would provide for this sort of mediated or facilitated conversation that is independent of the the court process already did its thing.
Right.
So that's what restorative justice really was birthed to mean in the beginning in the U.S. But there are really two important caveats. One is that the idea behind restorative justice, namely that accountability can be intrinsic, right? That accountability doesn't have to mean imposing a cost, a consequence, a punishment on someone. Rather, accountability can be the very process of someone realizing how they've affected someone, how their actions have borne a cost on others, and taking ownership over that and wanting to repair it. That sort of empathically driven process of understanding and it's almost like a self-realization thing. That philosophy, combined with the idea that we all are tied to each other. So in many ways, when you harm one person and the relationship with that person, the harm actually ripples out through a community of people. And similarly, when you do something, the community of people and what they've done to raise you, to socialize you, to provide access, resources, well-being, or not, affects how you act out in the world. So there's a sort of very interdependent notion. And those two ideas and philosophies and things well predate, the use of restorative justice in the 70s. They go back to a lot of indigenous cultures. And so it's important to note, even though indigenous folks didn't have the words restorative justice, they've been living that way, many of them, as a way of being.
Right. Whereas like a eye for an eye type of approach is like could have perpetuating effects.
Yeah.
And because as you say, the energy and attention that has come from a community just to raise any individual, like that in itself is a stream of at least one sort of attention, love, or nurturing, or the lack of, so how a certain event or a certain action may affect others around. Therefore, the reaction, or maybe not necessarily reaction, but that's how it feels like when it's like, in the quote justice system where, it's like an eye for an eye, like, 150-year sentence or something like that. Like, that seems like a reaction, instead of a thought out, empathetic, like love-based and restorative-based approach to bring actual like healing and actual closure, and so then therefore the potential to like truly move forward and repair.
Consider the radical notion that what we currently see as perfectly normal and maybe natural, namely this eye for an eye philosophy and all the criminal law institutions that surround us, that those are parts of human reality that are fairly recent. Depending on where you live, they may be as recent as just a century or two old. That they coincided with, the kind of vast stratification of society and wealth that have occurred through the various industrial and agricultural revolutions. And that whole mindset of punishing your way to accountability is quite recent, and has shaped and been shaped by the way Western societies have acted. So everything from how a family is structured and how you raise children and how you talk to children on the smallest scales, to how countries wage war and colonize others, imperialize others. So I like to say restorative justice, the term itself refers to something that's much deeper, broader, and older, that wasn't necessarily named. But also more recently than the 70s, 80s, and 90s, when restorative justice really was taking root in sort of contemporary criminal systems. More recently, restorative justice has expanded well beyond criminal systems. It's, there's restorative parenting. Like, how do you apply these principles and practices to addressing harm and building relationships in your family? There's restorative justice in the workplace. I'm personally involved with restorative justice in cases of sexual harm in university spaces, in community, including faith organizations, sort of community level groups, in reintegrating folks coming home from incarceration, and then in schools. And in schools in particular, the principles and practices seem to have worked really well because you have such a finite or such a, let's say, discrete community. A neighborhood these days out here, if you look out here, I don't know who, you know, I might run in and I might know 1 out of 20 of my neighbors here. But in a school, you're likely to know over the course of the years that you're staying there, you know, a good portion of who you have. And the more you have a community that's characterized by relationships, the more you have the power of relationships. Relationships give you that empathic power. They give you that reason to go above and beyond material self-interest, above and beyond the, you know, accountability through punishment. When there are relationships, you want people to grow. You want people to be included. You want everyone to matter, and you want outcomes to be satisfactory for everyone. So schools have been like one of the places, the hotbeds of the growth of restorative justice. And just to tie it back to this police-free Montgomery schools work, the whole idea there is it's not that we're going to ignore issues of safety, because they're very real issues of safety. It's just instead of dealing them at the symptomatic level, you know, when the actual violence erupts, which there's still, like I mentioned, there are still certain ways that you can respond when violence erupts, and
preventative measures.
Police can come in those really rare occasions.
Yeah.
But then there's also folks who know how to de-escalate without violence. So there's non-violent, right? But then that's all on the back end. On the preventative side, there's this whole restorative justice framework for building communities with thick relationships that make violence, misbehavior, whatever you want to call it, in schools, that justified police in the first place, that make those, that reduce those. So that's a big piece of it, right? Safety is, it's like safety through community, safety through relationships.
And something that I see is you're saying this is that has to come from an opportunity that's given, like a space that's given, you know, which is a step beyond a reactionary state. You know, if something happens, is bothersome, the first thing is to react potentially, and that's usually out of a place of like emotion. You know, it's not clear, but whereas, so I'm remembering a time when I was in elementary school, you know, and I was being bullied by this guy, and like just one day I was over it, you know, and I would be, just like getting picked on and all this stuff. And so I was like tired of it and walked away. I went and just found like some stick or something, you know, and just came back and just started beating this dude up with a stick. You know, but we were just little kids, you know, we were in like 3rd grade or something like that. So it wasn't like crazy or anything, but like the what was behind it on both ends was incredibly misunderstood, you know, but it was coming from a place of like confusion and anger and essentially which erupted in the interactive space, violence. And neither of us got in trouble. They just made us sit with each other, and they made us talk to each other, and we wound up becoming like really close friends over like the next, you know, whatever, 6-7 years or something like that, you know. But like, and so that's I guess that's what I'm trying to point at, like, because and especially in that scenario, as children in a community, if there is the space for that growth, if there's the space for that extra bit of thought and it's not just thought, but thought and compassion and empathy, um, and understanding that can come after the reactionary, sort of things that come out of like a more stressed and enclosed and feeling of not having options, but if there are options, healthy options that are able to be presented, I think that especially with children, that's a very potentially powerful way to be able to to facilitate that change and that sort of healing and recognition of our interconnectedness, like, between each other. I'm curious, like, how what you think some of the effects could be just on a subtle level, for children who are growing up in these school systems. I mean, already the kids are forced to go to these places. There's no choice in that already.
Yeah, I wanted to say, like, if maybe the more radical view of this is that so there's sort of a Native American proverb that harm is the symptom or the sign of a lack of balance in a community, and acts of harm. And when we look at what we demand of young people, in terms of everything from how the school system is structured, the school day, how learning happens, the many pressures that are there under to perform at oftentimes at standardized paces that may not be calibrated to their own particular development, the ways that their natural desires to inquire, to learn, to explore, are kind of funneled and channeled into particular ways that might extinguish their own spark.
Yeah. I can personally relate to that quite a lot. Yeah.
And then, never mind the many students who arrive at school with their bellies empty, or who have to juggle taking care of siblings, or dealing with forms of violence, drugs, incarceration, or whatever it is in their family life. All those stresses,
and all of this
and are meant to perform, in school, and stay up, but not without really a place to have emotional support for those things. So I think the whole package is, it needs to be looked at.
I absolutely agree, and I think well, we're both in agreement of that. That makes me think of, it's like, and this is how I felt, growing up in Maryland, and it was like being a circle, and just like, everybody around me just trying to force me into like the square or the triangle thing. I'm like, I'm clearly not this, and they're like, doesn't matter. This is where you're supposed to go, and you have to go in here, and yeah, I remember feeling like it was like I was being attacked by what they were making us do. I remember when middle school started, I had to start waking up at like 5:30 every day to get on the bus, to be on a bus for like an hour before I got to school. So from 6th grade until I graduated high school, I had to wake up at like 5:30, 6 o'clock at 5 days a week, as a kid. It doesn't, and for me personally, that didn't work for my body, and stuff. It caused me a lot of issues, and like, and so just to speak personally on the thing as a whole, and inherently, so within that space, within that container, already like being dragged out of bed, and that's, again, speaking personally, that one of the things that made difficult was like my home life, because it was just like, I don't want to wake up, so then like my mother and I would get in arguments and stuff. She'd be like, you gotta go to school, because she's being held responsible, legally. If I don't go to school, like, she can be criminally responsible for that, if I miss some, and so like she's, and that's where I'm like, I don't want to, and so within that space, being in this place that most kids don't want to be in, having grown adults with guns there with no reason other than just like waiting for you to do something that they decide you're not supposed to do, like that to me, it sends very very not cool messages, basically. I could find other ways to say that, but it seems like that does not show any child that this is a safe place where you can make mistakes and grow from them and learn from them, and like that's not indicative of a community to me. That's indicative of look, you're here. If you don't step up, you're out. Like, we don't, and it's like that, and symbolically, to have versus counselors or therapists or whoever else may be qualified and inherently non-violent, symbolically, these people with guns, and I'm curious as to what you think, what that just that effect could be on, could have on children, just like being in that space.
Space with police.
Yes, yeah. Where that's just a part of their day. Where where it's just like, oh yeah, Officer Joe's over there, but it's just like, it's kind of weird. He's the only person with a gun in this whole place, and so it's almost like this. It's like a prison. It's just like, oh, there's somebody in the tower watching over all, because everybody's half their size. It's. Yeah. It seems like it's there's just, to me, there's an underlying threat of behave or violence will, behave, or not, we're here to love you. And
well, I think it's there's multiple experiences, and there are members of the school community who will feel greater safety with police around. Those are likely to be the folks who have really positive associations with police, who don't have reasons to fear the police, grew up in neighborhoods where police were largely seen as friendly and supportive, don't have, relatives, friends, or stories of others who've been unjustifiably, harmed by police. So I don't doubt that there are folks like that in the community, and then there are folks who do have negative associations with the police, who, these days, we have more than enough examples of police violence, particularly on black men and women, and so, if you grow up black in this country, more likely than not, you're taught from early on to be very careful around police, because of the much greater risks.
And that's
And
something that's very hard for people to understand when the
yeah,
people who grow up and then they're wind up currently living in neighborhoods where that's, it's friendly officer, Bill over there, he's just checking on everybody, and this the so and so gives him some like that. How can that be bridged? How can that how can there be empathy and understanding between, if it's a neighborhood to neighborhood thing, because as you say, we're all tied together, and we're all connected, and somehow some people are unable to see that in similar ways. What do you think about that?
in what sense?
Like, if as far as overall, community, without demonizing anyone, how can the very real adversity and struggles of our brothers and sisters be recognized and honored, and then therefore addressed? When, because there's one thing, preach to the choir all you want, but who really needs to understand and to be able to find a way to in their own feelings understand and make that connection with others.
Yeah. I mean, what you're speaking to, I think, is something that I think a lot about. There's, in the work of removing police from schools, I think you encounter a number of like dominant or at least competing narratives, right, about our society and about humanity and human nature. And one of them is that one of them is either implicitly or explicitly based on some notion of evil, and that there it has to be contained, and that it's in the core of humans, maybe all, maybe some, and to protect the innocence within us, we need to contain that through force, and it's legitimate. And there's variations of that particular, narrative, that some of them are, are racist when they sort of veer into ascribing that evil to a race or a culture
or a neighborhood,
or a neighborhood, a geography, a nationality, and so forth. But they generally have that overarching story, and I think to believe that is not. I mean, I think to believe that in a sense is to be. I hate to say it, but I think it's to be an American in a way. Like that particular story is wrapped up in I think how this country likes to see itself and talk about itself in the world community. So I think it's sort of deep in the ethos and identity, growing up in this country. And I'm not saying that this is not the only country. There are many countries who have this, I think, this particular narrative as well. So holding this narrative, I see it as understandable, and I see the very real fear that people have, that if you don't have police, things would slip into chaos. The very real fear of experiencing, the sort of evil unleashed. And of course, there are things that happen every day that the news will make sure you know about, that are sickening, from cases of child abuse and rape and human trafficking and so forth, right? Those things are happening, and police are around the country are hard at work tracking these things down, detaining people, stopping it. So I don't want to suggest that none of that, that those things aren't true or don't matter or don't
Right.
take place.
Yeah.
The bigger question is, right, can we step away from that narrative long enough, right, to recognize that there's more going on?
Yeah.
Right? That we live in an incredibly fractured, stratified, inequitable society that for all of the prosperity and wealth, the opportunity, it's not experienced evenly.
Inherently.
And it's on a long history of having of unevenness,
That
to
is,
put it mildly.
to be very clear, that is specifically the foundation that this entire country is built upon, is taking from others.
Yeah, right.
Absolutely.
Right.
And so with the like what you said, to be able to step back from that narrative, because I think from my experience, talking with people who might find themselves on the side of feeling safer with police around, and seeing people who not being able to understand how somebody could not want that. And I've interpreted that as if it seems like somebody's like anti-police, and then also then therefore wants all of these awful things to continue unchecked, as and to me that just seems like an expression of the same reactivity, but just in reverse, where it's just like, oh well, but they're doing that, and so then they cut that out and cut them out, and it's just another finger pointing game, if it's left at that, if we don't do what you're saying and take a step back, further.
Yeah, and so I don't know. Let me try to articulate. So the other narrative is that what's happening around us, and the great degree of violence that engulfs us and that we're scared of and so forth, is not because of some kind of evil. It's because we've alienated ourselves from each other enough through the various systems that, albeit could have been, could definitely have aspiring justifications, right, for wealth and prosperity and well-being, but somehow they may not really be calibrated well to the human body and the human nervous system. Anyway, it's all to say that what is happening is the system isn't working for us. The system, the culture that we find ourselves. And I like to think about where this other narrative already lives alive and well, without us having to do these great mental backflips of imagining, a utopian society. If you think of, first of all, most wealthy neighborhoods, there isn't much of a police presence there. That's not to say that there isn't issues there, and domestic violence and things, and they have alarms and things like, and big gates and locks and to protect them. But police have been removed already and were not a common feature of schools in this generation's or last generation's lifetime, at least. Um, Another thing to think about is a family. Consider a functioning family, like a family that hasn't cracked under the strain of poverty or inherited trauma or mental illness or whatever it is, and is able to function smoothly. There isn't something like a a police function that maintains safety there. Safety is maintained by the strength of the bonds of the family and their ability to communicate and work things through. Similarly, with functioning, healthy businesses and community organizations. And those are all examples from, kind of this context. We could look around the world and find many examples where police are non-existent. They don't have, there aren't resources, or there, barely resources for them to do anything, and yet people live in healthy relationship with each other. Yeah, so I think the question then is not, it's not really about police. It's about what's going on in the society, that and how do we understand? How do we make sense of what's going on in society? That really helps us address things at their roots.
The roots, yeah, that's as we mentioned earlier, this entire country as we're in right now, its roots are directly, like, they've suffocated out all these other roots to be here, and so and to me personally, that seems like where we all have to really start, is like recognizing that our cities are built on, like, homes, where people lived and had families and had lives that were just as valid and special as ours and anybody else, and that was the start of these systems in which we're now dealing with. From what I can see, seemingly just a long series of reactions from all of these sorts of things happening, and like, speaking of Montgomery County, it's not Baltimore, but just like what I've been doing recently, is just trying to research just even lightly about my hometown, Frederick, and these different places. And just, why was this built here? And like, what happened here? Like, what and so and so, and but for example, with how, like, the city of Baltimore is so clearly segregated through legislature, and how it has been for such a long time, and how the infrastructure is literally built to keep specifically certain people of certain skin tone in and out of specific areas.
Mm-hmm.
So that seems to be, to me, what we can see of these roots right now, and people don't want to look at that. But it's like what has to happen for us to be able to see where we're at truly right now. And if we don't see where we're truly at right now and how we got here, then how can we move forward in a way that honors us and all that came before us? Because if we don't do that, then how can we honor anything that is to happen truly? And that takes us all. We're all here together, and we're all interconnected in that way, and I think that information is not necessarily readily available a lot of the times, but it's also scary, like I was saying earlier over dinner. I was I've been yelled at. I've had my jobs, my work threatened. Like when I lived back out there, for not even saying anything, not being specific, but just even touching on those roots, those actual roots. It threatened my job and my home, and I don't know what to do about that. Like what is that in the cultures in the communities, and how it seems like it's, to me, some deep pain and resistance and denial, in a sense, of how we all got to be on this continent at all, and with all those skeletons in our closet, so to speak, like, it seems inevitable that there's this violence and all this division and aggression and reactivity, because we're in like a as if two mirrors are like put in front of each other, and it's just like that's what's just been happening, for the last few hundred years now, and now here we are, with all of the festering issues that has left us with, on such a large scale. And I don't know. I don't really know what exactly I'm pointing at. Aside from just the need to address that in a way that doesn't that I think doesn't condemn people. I think from my observations that it's been something like, at least that's how it's felt when I've spoken with people about like America's genocidal history, even if on a light, or specifically with like police and schools, that bringing that up, the feeling that I get from the reaction from certain people is like, how could you, we're in this violent world, this space where like everybody's like out to get everybody in some way, or when there's an opportunity they will, or something, and like you said, that these narratives like of human nature, of being something like that, I don't buy it personally. I think that's nonsense, except for the fact that we are in the reverberations of that, and we're dealing with scenarios that are expressions of that sort of violence and threat, and so of course people are going to be feeling it and be scared of it. But if there's not, like we were saying earlier, if there's not that opportunity given, out of genuine compassion and genuine want for healing, and for all parties to feel satisfied and safe and able to move forward, it seems it can't be possible. It's like it has to be a gift, it seems.
Yeah, I think you're touching on a very important and yet difficult challenge of our times. It's a challenge that has played itself out time and again in history, and we remember those well and honor and celebrate them. that have managed to do this pushing while still loving, this sort of power and love, right? The figures of Gandhi and Dr. King come to mind. I think about this a lot. I think about how it's a very long and statement. It goes something like, you know, things seem to be shifting in at least many people's awareness, and that is really threatening to other people. I think it threatens the narratives, the identities, the power, and at the same time the things have persisted and continue to persist such a long time, and there's so much pain and such a deep burning sense of injustice, and so much anger, it seems understandable, that arises from that. And at the same time, those who find themselves like resistant to the change cannot fully understand why the change is needed, or cannot fully come outside of the notion that progress is happening, has been happening, and things are so good. And at the same time, it's difficult to tell those who've waited for so long and continue to struggle for a meaningful form of progress to continue to wait and let things happen incrementally and slowly.
Mm-hmm.
And right? I think which part of that and chain you land on probably depends a lot on how you're particularly situated. I know for me, with the various racial and class and other forms of privilege, it's easy for me to espouse nonviolence and kind of radical compassion, even for the most powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And that's sort of inclusive. Like, my ideal is a world where even the most wealthy, most powerful would be better off than they are now. And it might not be materially, but it would be psychologically,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, that seems to me my ideal.
It's safe to say that, yeah.
And yet, I recognize I can even afford to entertain those kinds of notions. Well, let's say not afford, but that I come at those notions from life experiences that are very much shaped from my position. Not any one of us is going to make decisions about what clause in that chain matters and things like that. We're all going to add our own clauses to a chain, and the apparent conflicts between different groups, even within like advocacy communities, there's conflicts there. I'm involved with Extinction Rebellion, and to some extent, and there's been a lot of conflict there, to the degree to which Indigenous, Black, people of color, so forth, should be centered as one of the main demands of the Extinction Rebellion climate justice movement, or whether they shouldn't be centered in order to broaden the base and attract more people into the movement. And that's a really important conversation to have. And I think as long as folks continue to do the work, what my hope is that these questions and tensions, even within movements, they don't stay. that with time they resolve themselves. How? It could vary. I mean, it could just be that you have new generations, new people who think in new and different ways, and old tensions and old contradictions don't seem like contradictions anymore, right?
Right.
It could be that just, yeah, young, fresh minds see the world differently. And yeah, the old ones die out with the older generations. It could be that somehow those tensions, you know, something comes out as kind of prominent. An idea, a belief starts to gain so much credence, much like we've seen changes in kind of idea notions of human and civil rights that now seem to be self-evident. Like, people don't question things that were not couldn't be taken for granted 100 years ago, but now they seem to be almost universally accepted. So I think in some ways there might be some victory of things over time. And I think we need to accept that there will always be tension. There will always be conflict, and that can be generative.
That's an inherent part of existence.
Yeah.
You know, and so I guess that's what we're talking about. Is are we going to just be in a constant state of reaction to?
Well, let me make it concrete, because I'm worried. So, like, I'm doing this work with removing police from schools. On the one side of me might be folks who are like, hold on, we need police. What are you talking about? Like, a police. I only felt safe when there was police at my school. I was picked on, bullied, and it was police and police who were close friends, right? You might have people on one side of me saying that, and people on my other side of me saying, what do you mean about allowing police on campus ever? Or what do you mean about not putting an even harder stance and abolishing police altogether?
Right.
So, I guess what I'm saying is that those tensions, again, well, maybe next generation, 2 generations from now, will resolve themselves. Maybe police will mean such a different thing after they've been removed from schools, after the hundreds of post George Floyd bills have been passed through all over the country that have and are, and hopefully will continue to sort of reframe, refine, really, really hone in on what each of those communities wants their police to be and do. Maybe that tension I have between the person on my left and right that won't exist in the next generation, because police just mean a whole different thing. Safety means a whole different thing. Maybe it's because it becomes obvious that you don't use police for mental health issues. You don't use police as, our crisis response, first default crisis response system. You don't use, right, like, we just have other tools that have become normalized. But in the time being, just to acknowledge, like, it's tough to know what's the right thing to do and say, and sitting with that tension with the people around you. Yeah.
And knowing that it's okay, and that it's like, okay, all right, things are a little tense right now, you don't have to snap back or like react.
Yeah.
Like you were saying, you have this kid and that kid who are having trouble, like, let's sit together.
Yeah.
And like see if you really don't like each other.
Yeah.
Like, what's going on, and
yeah, I just keep seeing as we talk that just that how like I agree with you. I think that over time, that's why I think this is such a cool thing that you're doing, because it is the children, you know, it is the future generations that I think we have a huge responsibility to do what we can to give them the space to be able to like really connect with each other in as best we can, you know, and and to help nurture potential community in the future, you know, because here we are, you know, I mean, something that you mentioned, in my lifetime, I'm 26, I've seen a complete, I mean, mental health wasn't a thing when I was a kid. It just wasn't talked about. It's not, you know, it's just like it's not acknowledged as a legitimate. It was not acknowledged as like a legitimate thing for anybody to, you know, what someone says, like, you know, it's not a wasn't like an actual thing, it seems. So just that shift alone, you know, to now being at the point where like, okay, now maybe police shouldn't be the ones that are responding to people who are having issues with mental health, or, you know, XYZ, you know, like, I think it seems like we're going in a direction, you know, where this is truly possible, you know, where those tensions can really be, you know, changed and lightened up, you know. So and yeah, so I was super excited to speak with you about this, because it makes me really happy to hear that this effort is going on, and especially in a way that's very thoughtful and not condemning, you know, or writing off a certain group, you know, or you know, or making it completely, you know, unavailable, you know, and recognize that everyone's potential role, but what would really be the best for, you know, what would really be the best for some children who get in a fist fight, you know, do they need to do they need to get locked away? Do they need to get put somewhere where they're, you know, told for the rest, you know, that where it's imprinted in them that they're bad, that they're less than, or that like now they have to be dealt with, you know, like I think that's something that we can, that you are, that I hope to try to help, you know, give to the future generations that come around, because it is you know, kind of up to them. You know, it's up to all of us, of course, but you know, but like the amount of little kids that I know in my life right now that are so smart, it blows my mind. You know, my niece, I remember she was like 6 years old asking me questions, and I would just completely, like, philosophically, just like, I'm like, and it's not a coincidence, you know, because we're in this space now where there's the access to information is so vast, you know, and so I think you touched on it earlier, just like taking that step back, you know, like we can all recognize, like, hold on a second, we are not equipped to know what their life is going to be like, you know, we just got to make sure that they could be like safe, and but also like authentically connected, and in a communal sense, and in an empathetic way, and in an understanding way, you know, that maybe can help children feel in place and understand where they're at, and so then, and as I'm saying this is coming from me feeling a complete lack of this, you know, a complete lack of knowing where I am, you know, how I got here, and so then therefore having absolutely no idea how I could possibly proceed, in a way that is healthy, that is respectful, and that's like honoring. That's something I personally tried, to I learn it myself, and so yeah, I just see you actually doing that, and like, working to give that space to children, and in that way to where they can have just a chance at like not even reconciling, but just to make mistakes. Like I think everybody needs. It's like everybody makes mistakes, and to be so immediately, to be in a scenario, in an environment where there's a threat of condemnation, if you step out of line in some way, that goes deep. That sows deep seeds of fear and resentment, and I think can greatly hinder creativity and compassion, things along those lines. So yeah, it's really cool what you're doing. Yeah. Really appreciate you talking about all this.
Yeah, my pleasure. Yeah, fun to get to spin.
Well, yeah, with that said, I'm sure we've gone a little while now.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we can pick this up another day too.
Sounds good.
I'm getting sleepy.
I'm getting sleepy.
Thanks, Tarek. Thanks for talking with me and sharing yourself and with me and everyone listening. Yeah, that's what I recognized about you. Right when started to get to know you is how hard you work, and how you see you put your heart into the things that you do, and in all aspects, as I've been able to be around you for the last few months, and I really admire that and respect it. And, I appreciate just being able to share time with you and this conversation.
Enjoy being seen that way. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Jake, for the curiosity and the depth and reflections. Yeah.
Until next time.
Till next time.
Thanks for listening, everybody.
Thanks for listening, everybody. That was Tarek Maassarani. Tarek sent me a link to share with y'all for a Google Doc, like a shared Google Doc that has resources, contacts, literature, information, guides, all sorts of different stuff, all on restorative justice, which we got to touch on today, but the entirety of that subject goes very deep, and yeah, in the description to this podcast there will be a great resource, thanks to Tarek, for going deeper into the realm of restorative justice and of just trying to do better and trying to help. Yeah, thanks for listening. Until next time.